I'll tell you a little bit about my background, and then let's jump in. So I was born in San Diego, and naturally, when you're born in San Diego, you move to Alaska. So I grew up in Alaska, lived there for 21 years, and I've always kind of been an entrepreneur. My first job was commercial salmon fishing. So Deadliest Catch, and you guys ever watch that? I was 14 years old, 98 pounds, soaking wet, and doing my best Deadliest Catch impression. I worked for 1 month, and I made $2,000, which was pretty good for a 14-year-old. If you did it hourly, it was way below minimum wage. And I got to the end of that month, they gave me my paycheck, and I was like, I know how much salmon we caught, and I know how much money the owner is making based on that, and I think I want to be an owner from now on. And so later that summer, my dad hired me to do driveway seal coating for his driveway. Paid me $200 to do it, and I thought, man, like that only cost me $40 in a couple hours. Like this is a good deal, and so started Stephen Perry's driveway seal coating from there. Paid my whole way through college with that company, and when I was 20 years old, I was just about to graduate with my finance degree and interviewed to be a life insurance agent, because when you're 20, you want to sell life insurance, right? Ended up, I remember sitting at my last interview with them, and I got kind of smart alecky, and I was like, well, I mean, Rob, I could make $100,000 in the summer doing what I'm doing with my seal coating company. He's like, oh, that's great. My top guy made $1 million this summer. I was like, okay, I need to learn a little bit more about this business. So I started in the financial services business, did that for 5 years as an advisor, which is very, very similar to being a real estate professional, right? It's all about lead generation and fulfilling what you told the people that you could do for them. And I was okay, you know, in my 20s, right? I'd make a bunch of money and then I'd disappear for a month and then start my business all over again. I know none of you guys have ever done anything like that. And then when I was 25, I actually decided I wanted to go into a leadership position. So I got promoted to partner in the firm. And so my role shifted from building a practice to building a team. And that was what I needed to start establishing the habits that I needed to be doing as a producer to be successful, because I had other people that were dependent on me. They trusted me to get into this business and lead them into being able to provide for their family. And so I made sure I got to work before everyone and worked harder and was there later than everyone else. And had some success in that. I was the youngest partner in our company nationwide, got promoted to senior partner when I was 28, managing partner when I was 30, which moved my wife Tabitha and I down to Lubbock, Texas. Anyone ever been to Lubbock, Texas? You have? Okay, wow. Congratulations. The joke about Lubbock, Texas, so Texas Tech, right? Some of you guys maybe have heard of that. I actually hadn't, but apparently it's a big deal in Texas. They fly in their recruit. Oh, okay, how about this? Patrick Mahomes. Any football, right? Okay, Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes was at Texas Tech when I lived in Lubbock. And the joke is that when they were recruiting athletes, they would fly them in at night so they didn't see like the landscape and where they were coming into and like the 300 flat miles around the town. That was a very interesting 2.5 years personally for Tabitha and I, but professionally was phenomenal. So I moved into this office here. I tell the story in the book where they had doubled in size over the prior 4 years. So there was 40 advisors in that office, and we went on a phenomenal run over 2.5 years where we doubled the size of the office. Our leadership team grew from 2 of us to 6 of us. We won 19 national trophies in 2 years. They only hand out 15 a year. So we won over the half of the trophies for 120 offices in the whole country over a 2.5 year period. God very much blessed that time. We had a blast, and then we got an opportunity to move to Minnesota, because naturally, when you've been warm for a long time,
something's happening.
Naturally, when you've lived in warm Texas for 2.5 years, you want to go back to the cold, right? So we moved to Minnesota, and I'll tell you guys, the last 2.5 years, how many of you guys have had a difficult couple years in the business? Maybe the last couple years, maybe prior to. The last 2.5 years has been the most difficult time professionally that I've ever experienced. When I got there, the office was like this, like it was going like that. And any of you guys have ever gone into companies where it's going like that, and your job is to, as a managing partner, like do that? I hadn't experienced that before. Like I said, we were 100% growth for 3 years straight, and I've learned so much that it's been very, very empowering to say, because we're pulling out of it now and we're headed up, we're having a growth year for the first time, and really had to dig into my why, which I know you guys are going to talk about later today. And in that time, got to put the finishing touches on this book, which I started in Texas, publish it, and then share that story. And all this book is a collection of all the framework that we teach inside of our organization that has both helped have 100% growth year over year over year and pull us out of 50% decline to have growth. So that's a little bit about my background. My wife Tabitha and I have been married for 10 years. She is a professional life coach, and in her prior life, i.e. before kids, she got her master's degree in social work and worked in the prison system. And then I have a 4-year-old daughter named Liberty and a 7-year-old daughter named Lily, which I also talk a lot about in the book. But that's enough of a background because Brent didn't want to read my bio. I tried to condense that as much as you can to give you a little bit of a reason for why I get to be here in front of you and have the privilege to share today. I want to commend all of you guys, though, because I do these things for my organization several times a year. This started at 9, and most of you guys were here. And I know it was breakfast, but obviously you didn't really even take advantage of breakfast. Y'all were here at like 8:10, 8:15. And that says a lot about who you are, the culture that you guys have, that Brent's built in this organization, that you guys generally like each other, you want to learn, and you guys should be proud of that. That's really, really cool. So with that, I'm trying something new. Who wants to try something new today? I warned Brent. He gave me permission. Okay. So the good news about like COVID is like we all learned how to use this if we didn't know how to use this before, right? If you've eaten anything in the last year and a half, you know how to use that. So I created auto notes for you. So this is going to be the easiest note taking you've ever done. So pull that up, and it'll take you to a landing page that will help you in taking notes on everything that I'm going to talk about today, and then I'm going to send them to you. So you don't even have to keep track of them, because heaven knows I always lose my spiral notebook from the events, and so it's actually going to email it back to you, and it's going to send you reminders every few days in an effort to try to help you give actionable takeaways from what I'm going to talk about today. So you'll see in that there'll be little prompts along the way. Just answer those quick questions. Some of them are things that will take you a minute to think about, and others are just answering along through the pro. Is it working? Is it working for everybody? Okay, good. I've tested it like 7 times, but sometimes you need to test things like 100 times. So how many of you guys are in here? Like 30? All right, now we tested it 37 times. Okay. So the first question, what's the first question on there? What's causing you stress? So who has something? Is anyone have any stress going on right now? Children. Okay. Oh, that's right.
I have some stress because I missed the thing.
Oh, yeah. Right. That's a real easy one. That's a habit. You got to pay attention habit.
He needs to sit up front.
And I know, guys, like, this is a group of real estate professionals. I'm putting you on your phone. This is a risk because you guys are getting text messages of like, so if you need to put it on do not disturb, if that's going to help you. I know it's a risk putting this on here, but I want to help make this actionable for you, not just today, but over the next several weeks. All right. So we got kids. What else we got? Contracts. Clients. Yep. Expectations. Diet. Sleep. Yeah. All right, Tara. We're gonna grow some capacity today. What else? World affairs. Is there anything going on?
Let's go, Brandon.
We'll talk about some stuff for that today, actually. What else? Give me a couple more. I mean, you got to write something in there. Dishes. Laundry. Are you guys all copying Tara's stress into yours? Okay. Pets. In-laws. Yeah. My wife left me with my in-laws for the last 4 days. They're amazing, but they're a little stressful.
That'd be amazing.
All right, so what I want you to do as we go through this is you learn the framework and start to learn about some tools we can put in place to help you manage the stress. I'll call out some maybe tools that would help with in-laws and world affairs and contracts and clients. But then when we get done, depending on how much time we have left, because Brent gave me 90 minutes, we may actually go through a couple live coaching examples on how to do this as well. So let's jump right in. So before I start the framework, I want to give you a little bit of an insight into who I am, how I think, and how I approach these things in life. So there's 4 truths. You've probably heard all of these from one book or another. There's nothing new. You're just re-saying stuff other people have said here. But I think it'll be powerful in helping have the right framework or mindset going into this. So the first truth is determinism, right? Whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, it's up to you. You get to decide that. And I've heard this a lot of ways, but one of the ways that really stood out to me with this is when an author is writing a book, a fiction book, right, a story, they get to decide how that story turns out. And our life is the same way. Like, we get to make all of the decisions. Now, we don't get to control what happens to us, but we always get to control how we respond to that. And this framework is going to allow us to direct our life based on what happens to us towards the direction we want. So I believe whether we think we can or we think we can't, we get to decide that. Second truth is that limitations in your life are going to show up both in your personal life and your professional life. I don't believe in work-life balance. I believe in work-life integration. If we try to balance our life, we're always going to be out of balance, and then we're always going to feel like we're failing. And so if we can be successful in our professional life, the same habits that are making us successful there should be able to translate to our personal lives, and vice versa. And the opposite is true. How many of you guys have had terrible experiences going on, tons of stress in your professional life that's drifted over to your personal life? Right? Anybody? And how many of you guys have had rough, stressful situations going on in your personal life that's drifted over to your professional life? Yeah? So it's important to be successful and intentional in building our capacity in both. Third thing, life is hard or life is hard, right? And I notice I didn't start with this, right? Because you would have probably been like, "Can you leave?" Like no one opens up a personal development talk with life is hard or life is hard. But let's think about it. To be all of the things that Tara just listed right there, right? If that was your life where you're just always stressed out all of the time, right? I'm not saying you are, but like if that was the case, right? That's a pretty tough life, right? Like, that sucks. No one wants to do that. The opposite is true, though, too. I tell the story in the book. So Adam Hergenrother, some of you guys know, I'm sure Brent knows him, lives in Vermont. I was with him and Reed in Coeur d'Alene, and I'm sitting there in this room, and I'm listening to them talk, and they were like in their triathlon mode, where they're like, all right, let's go out for a 120-mile bike ride tomorrow morning. I'll meet you at 4 o'clock, and then, before that, I'm going to go and swim across Lake Coeur d'Alene and back. And I'm just sitting there, I'm like, these like superhuman, like over-the-top disciplined people, like that's hard too. To have that much discipline, that's hard. But which life do you want to choose? Which hard do you choose? You get to decide that. And then finally, this is where I get everyone back. After I told them life is hard and life is hard, working more or doing more does not mean working more hours. Like, I am a huge proponent for not working 7 days a week, 16 hours a day. And I know that's especially hard in your world because that's when your clients expect you to work. Something we've implemented in my organization, have any of you guys ever heard of the book 12-Week Year by Brian Moran? All right. So we use that for our planning. We do 12-week plans. And the interesting part about that is it aligns with quarters almost. But quarters actually have 13 weeks in them, right? And so the first week of the quarter, we cancel everything in our office. because the idea is that you're celebrating what you won last quarter and you're planning for the next quarter. And that gives a season of rest. And so I believe you can work smarter and not have to work more hours and get better results. And I talk about that in the book, but I think I think this is so extreme that if you're working 60, 70, 80, 90 hours a week consistently, there's seasons for that, but consistently, I think you're cheating. I think you're taking the easy way out, and we can be smarter and figure out a way. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. All right, so those are the 4 truths. Did everyone get that written down? Like, Steve, you need to go back. You need me to go back?
I was looking at her. He wasn't paying
You were copying her notes? Oh, man. You can copy each other's notes. It just won't be as effective. All right, so next crazy thing I'm going to say. How many of you guys believe this? Coming in today, stress is a gift. Woo! I only have 4 takers. That's actually more takers than I've ever had. So, Brittany, did they get the books yet? Okay, so you haven't read them yet. Okay. Because that would be like the only way you would know. But stress is a gift. Here's why I believe stress is a gift. Stress is a gift because it's life telling us, hey, guess what? You need to grow. You've maxed out your capacity, and it's time for you to proactively grow your capacity. And whenever we feel stress, if we can train our brain to switch that on and say, okay, I'm feeling stressed right now. I need to grow my capacity. Now let's talk about how we do that. So everyone has a certain capacity level wherever they are in life. It's based on 3 things, 3 pillars of capacity. Your education, your learning that you have, the habits that you have in place, and the relationships that you've established. So your capacity, and we're going to dive into each of these. We'll spend most of our time on this. Education, habits, and relationships. And what happens is we're running along through life doing our thing, and all the time we're hitting our head on our capacity ceiling. We're feeling stressed if we're doing things, right? If we're just sitting playing video games all day and drinking beer, right? There's not a lot of stress going on until there's a lot of stress going on, right? That also has its own problems. But because you guys are doers, because you guys are trying to take over the world, at least taking over Boise right now is what I hear, or have. You're going to feel stress. And when you feel stress, you have 2 choices. Choice number 1 is you can enter the breakdown cycle. So breakdown cycle has 3 stages. First stage of breakdown cycle, and I'm going to use an example that I know every single person in this room has experienced. You come into real estate and you're like, yes, I love this. I love the autonomy. I love the financial potential. I love how I get to help my clients. I love showing houses. I mean, how cool would that be to sit and do an open house and just show people, right? Right. And then all of a sudden it doesn't seem so easy. And you're like, this is hard. There's other realtors out there I have to compete against. My clients aren't the smartest people in the world. They don't do what I tell them to all of the time. Why did they? No, I told them it was going to sell at this, but they wanted to list it at that. This is dumb. And you get disappointed. And what happens is if you sit in disappointment for too long, you become disillusioned. Well, Brent said it was going to be easy. I'd have all these leads come in and I just had to make these many phone calls, and then these many people would sign up and hire me to sell their house, or I would get all of these listing appointments, and then and it's not working out that way. And I think he lied to me. And the market's changed, and it's too hard, it's too competitive, and these freaking Californians keep moving here. And like, and I was born in California, so I can say that. I don't think I want to do this anymore. And then you start interviewing other places. And like you hop on the job board and you see what's out there. And in my world, oftentimes I see people like, maybe I'll go back to what I was doing before. Like, I know it was really sucky then, and it wasn't going to let me live my best life, and that's why I started in real estate, but I haven't got paid in a while. And you know what? I think I'm just going to go back and I'm going to do that, right? And we go back to greener pastures. Now, why do I know all of us have had that? Because it's the same thing in my industry, and I've had that thought multiple times. And the thing about greener pastures is they are actually greener for a little bit. Let me tell you why. You're here, hitting your head on the top of your capacity ceiling, constantly feeling stressed. And when you go to greener pastures, you're going to a world that you already have been successful in, you already have capacity in. So let's just say, for example, you were a greeter at Walmart before you became a real estate professional, right? Well, you leave being a greeter at City of Trees Real Estate, go back to be a greeter at Walmart. You know how to do that. You already have capacity to handle being a greeter at Walmart. So for a period of time, you don't have stress, and it is greener. But sooner or later, you're going to feel the stress of, I can't pay my bills, I hate greeting people at Walmart, I hate being at Walmart, and I need to go make a change. And you're going to hit your head on your capacity ceiling again. So instead of going through the breakdown cycle, I suggest you have a breakthrough. So how do you have a breakthrough? Well, that's the million-dollar question. That's the secret of the capacity model. You need to grow your capacity through improving your education, your habits, and your relationships. All right, that was my 24-minute intro. Now you got the framework? You guys got the framework here? So we're going to spend the rest of our time diving into examples, stories, and action items for how we do that. Would that be useful? Okay. Any questions before we got anyone have any questions on the framework? We got to have the framework down before we can move forward. All right. Tara's already crushing all of her stress right now.
Jill, this is great.
All right. We're going to move on to the...
Can I just say I don't like that your PowerPoint's better than mine?
So this is an example of relationships. I have relationships with people who can make them better than I can make them. And I can introduce you to them. The one thing I don't like, I mean, this is kind of a cool little like Roman colonnade here, but it doesn't fit the like modern. So I'm still working on it. If any of you guys have a better graphic for my columns, my pillars, let me know. All right, so let's jump into education. So education is the first pillar of capacity, and the one I spend the least amount of time in is formal education, because that's really where we have the least amount of control on what we do to increase our formal education. And quite frankly, it's typically a history lesson. So in the book, I talk about it, but more so as I want you to identify the things you did to build your capacity as you were going through high school, trade school, college, like any of those, or grad school, professional licensing. And I define formal education as this: something you had to spend money for that gives you a piece of paper that says you learned. And there's probably very little of that left in your life, other than maybe some professional designations. Maybe, I don't know, broker licensing, or I don't quite know your world enough for that, but I know you can get some letters after your name, and that might help build your capacity. You know, it helps in our world. There's letters you can get after your name. I've got a lot of them, but it really didn't help build my capacity. It's the things that occur while you're getting your formal education. All of the things you have to balance to accomplish it, the financing of it, and the fact that you have to live life while also getting your formal education. So I spend the least amount of time on that. I do want to spend some time, though, on informal education, because this is where you guys get to decide going forward what education, what learning can I put in place to increase my capacity. So the first one I talk about is hard knocks. And this is another way of saying your failures. A lot of talk has been done. John Maxwell does a lot of talk about failing forward and how to learn from your challenges that you have. And this is really the crux of stress being a gift, where whatever it is that's causing us stress is what's going to cause us to learn to grow our capacity going forward. So thinking back to hard times on your life, and then think forward on the hard things you're going to face, where you're going to purposefully put yourself in a difficult situation and to grow your capacity. So that's where hard knocks come in. Athletics, How many of you guys do anything athletically right now, right? And it could be just going to the gym. It could be on a sports team, and could be running a marathon like my wife just did a couple weeks ago, right? There's a lot of capacity building that comes along with doing athletic adventures. One of the things for me, when we moved to Minnesota, I gained about 50 pounds in the financial services business. Like it's exactly what you think, right? And I know you guys don't do this, but like lunch and happy hour for 6 hours on like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday with clients, and like dinners and retreats and conferences where it's just like food and drink like all day long. And so I gained 50 pounds. I got up to like 231 pounds at my peak. And when we moved to Minnesota, I said, all right, this has got to stop. I got to make a change. And I am not a hamster wheel guy that's going to go on the treadmill. I'm not a triathlon guy, but I love playing basketball. And so I went and found myself a group of guys that play basketball. And what was cool about this group, right? What started out is just want to play some basketball, burn a few calories, get the heart rate up. It's a whole new family. And it's this group. And like when I got introduced to the group, it was like, yep, we start at 6 and we play till 7. I'm like, perfect. Because I'm way out of shape, and that's probably all the time that I can do it. And what I learned over time is I get there. So I get there at 6 and they'd already started. So then I get there at 5:50 and it's like, well, they already started. Then I get there at 5:40 and I still wasn't in the first 10. And what I learned was I had to get there before 5:30 if I want to warm up, get a couple shots in, and be in the first group of 10 to start playing. Well, imagine the amount of capacity, because that was something I really wanted to do, and it forced me to get up earlier than I had ever gotten up in my life consistently, and put me around the type of people that get up at 4:30 in the morning to go work on their body and have relationship with other people. So that's just a quick example of the type of capacity you can build by a simple athletic adventure. Education from your family. How many of you guys have like a really cool person in your family who's super smart or has been really successful in their life, right? Not a lot of hands going up, okay? Fair enough. I find that, and I'll talk a little bit about it later. I'm going to give you permission, for everyone who didn't raise their hand, I'm going to give you permission to actually separate yourself from the relationships that aren't productive in your family. But family can also be a good entree to where, because you have the same last name or some kind of relation, there's someone that you can have access to learn from as a mentor and teach you how they did what they did, because you have that common tie of family. Internships, starter jobs. 2 I'm going to spend a minute on here is books and coaching. So I have to tell you how ironic it is that I'm up here talking about a book that I wrote. Because 5 years ago, I hadn't read a book in like 20 years. I was the guy that prided himself on doing no reading whatsoever. Like AP English, my poor AP English teacher, I mean, I was Cliff Notes, Spark Notes, book summaries. I could turn like a 1-paragraph book summary into a 10-page report. I mean, that was me, and I prided myself in it. College, I'm in 2.71. Woo! And it was because I didn't do any reading. My wife hated it. She's like, I read every single page 7 times and rewrote the book and studied. I mean, like, so 5 years ago when I started coaching with Reed said, I finally like worked up the courage to pay for it, and I'm like, all right, you know what? This guy's gonna ask me to read. Leaders are readers. All right.
Read more.
I know, right? It's like you kind of have to figure out where it's going, right? So I remember it. Like, I was prepared. I was probably sitting on like a little thing like this, like on my call with him. I might have had AirPods. And he's like, all right, Steve, so tell me about your reading plan this year. I'm like, well, Reed, I haven't been a really good reader, but you know what? I'm going to read a book a month this year. And in his gentle way, he goes, that's really good, Steve. Someone in your position leading as many people should probably be reading a book a week. And I'm like, he goes, we'll settle on 2 a month. I'm like, all right, let's do it. And I didn't even know like who good book writers were. I think they're called authors. And so he gave me like my first 15 books to read. And I jumped in. I'm like, this is amazing. And two things. So I'll give you the permission here. Two things he gave me permission to do. Number one, Audible, audiobooks, those count. I had never even heard of that, right? Which, by the way, Brent was nice enough to buy you guys all a copy of my book, the physical copy, which is good for me because I make like $4 every time someone does that. But I know none of you are going to read it because no one actually reads physical books. So then you can go on Amazon and buy the audiobooks. You're like my wife.
Yeah.
I've got the Audible.
We already got it.
You got it too? You did all of it. All right, perfect. So you got the audiobook. So either way, right? If you want to read the physical book, audiobook, you got both of them. And I never heard about that. That was awesome because I'm driving from Lubbock to Amarillo, which nice part about that is like you don't even have to touch the steering wheel and you get to go 90 miles an hour. And so I burned through so many books on that. The second thing he gave me permission on is you don't have to finish it. Don't have to finish the book. Authors put their best stuff up front, right? It's not going to get any better on the back end of the book. So if you're not getting anything up front, you don't have to finish it. And that helped me know, like, all right, I'm not trapped to gut my way through this book. So those two things led to me reading 37 books my first year. And I think I got to like 45 the second year. So I just plowed through and I could pick, and I was learning everything. And then like, you guys know when like Brent's reading a new book, right? Because that's what your next team meeting is all about. And he's like teaching you like, right? I was the same way. Like, right? First thing you learn it and then you teach it, or you do it and then you teach it, right? So books, so much capacity from that. And then the last thing is coaching. And so with coaching, I remember when I became a new partner. I'm 25 years old. I am like crushing it, making $130,000 a year, thinking I'm the hottest thing in the world. And I'm sitting in my managing partner's office, and he's like, I just got off my coaching call. I'm like, what's that? He's like, coaching call? He's like, yeah, I just got. I'm like, he's telling me about it. I'm like, how much did that cost? He's like, I think it was like $500. And I'm like a month for the year? Like, what? He's like, no, for that call. I'm like, for one call? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, well, how often did you do that? He's like, every week. I'm like, every week? That must be like, that's a lot of money. And he's like, it's good. It's worth it. And I'm like, how could that possibly be worth it? And so I remember that moment, and it planted this thing in my mind where like, I can't afford that. Someday I'll be able to afford that. And for years, I'm like, I'll never be able to afford coaching. And then right as I'm moving to West Texas to become a managing partner where I'm responsible for leading leaders, not just leading producers, Reed's like, hey, I got a couple openings for clients. I'm like, all right, well, how much does it cost? And he tells me, I'm like, geez, yeah, wow, I figured. Wow. And my mindset, this is where the shift happened. It wasn't how can I afford that? It was what would need to happen on the back end for this to be a no-brainer financially. And so it took me a year. It was a year before I ended up hiring Reed. Tabitha remembers the conversations we're having, like, all right, I'm planning for this. We would need this and this and this to happen. And then ultimately it's like, all right, Reed, what can we expect from this? And that's how coaching works. Because think about it, right? When were you learning the most in life? When were you growing the most in life, right? When you were a kid, right? I got a 4-year-old, right? What's the difference between a 4-year-old and an 18-year-old? A lot, like 100x, right? What's the difference between an 18-year-old and a 32-year-old? 2 or 3x,
Yeah.
right? Like the amount of growth you go from 4 to 18, well, what do you have the whole time? You got a soccer coach, you got a band coach, you got a swimming coach, you got teachers, you got your Sunday school teacher. I mean, you got coaches all over your life, your parents every single day. And then all of a sudden we get into real life, adulthood, and we don't have any more coaches. We got to figure it out. You ever think about that? It's kind of weird, huh? And so it took me from 18 to 30 to figure that out. And then I'm finally like, all right, I probably should hire a coach. And the amount of growth over the last 5 years of my life has been about 5x. So I just, that is one of the biggest things you can do for your informal coaching. Those last two, books, informal education, books and coaching. Okay, good. Questions on that? Ready to move on from education? Where are we at? 9:38. Okay. We're going to go way over. No, Brent told me he nailed it to the second yesterday. So we'll honor that and keep going. Next thing is habits. So there are 3 types of habits. Being habits, having to do with who we are as a person. Relating habits, how we interact with others, which you'll see some crossover between that and relationships. And doing habits. So what is it that we do day in and day out? So the first one we're going to talk about is being habits. There are 3 of these, because everything good comes in 3s, right? Physical, spiritual, and intellectual or mental. And I just got interviewed for a podcast for a buddy of mine, and he asked me, Steve, which type of habits do you think is the hardest for people to do? And I hadn't been asked that question before. And so I told him, I said, I think it's the being habits. And that's why I start with this. Now, why are the being habits the most important? Or the most difficult to do? And I would say the most important. The reason is they have to do with ourselves. And who do we lie to the most? Is it other people or ourselves? Right? It's ourselves. Like, isn't that crazy? Like, we have the worst relationship with ourselves. We treat ourselves like crap. We break promises to ourselves all the time. We lie to ourselves. We mentally beat ourselves up. Naturally. How crazy is that? But everyone does it. And so that's why I think it's so important to get these in place. And quite frankly, the rest of them come pretty easy after that. So physical habits. The first thing with physical habits is, we all got to exercise. We all have to get our heart rates up. And for me, that was basketball. I told you about how I wanted to find something that I liked doing that had this byproduct. But the problem with exercise, how many of you guys have heard the phrase, you can't outwork the fork? Anyone heard that before? So it doesn't matter how much caloric expenditure you put out there, this right here can tear it apart in 30 seconds. And so getting both of those things in order. And so I ultimately got to the point where I had to hire a physical coach, a physical habits coach, where I have to report to him multiple times a day on how I'm expending calories and what calories I'm putting in. We use my Fitness Pal. I log everything in there. Because if I'm not doing good here, I can't live my best life everywhere else. And again, I keep referring back to Reed, but one of the things he said to me that really stuck in my mind about 8 years ago, I think it was when he moved from Alaska down to Spokane, and he was like, I'm going to start doing triathlons and doing all this crazy stuff. I'm like, why? And he goes, Steve, I can't get up in front of people and lead them well if I'm obviously 50 pounds overweight. I can't do that. And I'm like, wow. So my ability to lead others into building their best life, which is my why, I have to live by example in every area. And so that's been a journey that I've been frankly struggling through and going ups and downs and have not arrived by any means on that, but something that some of you guys I'm sure are very, very good at. That's a strength. Use that. That's building a lot of capacity. Second one is spiritual habits. And so for me, this is super, super important. And so my lens in my world is I'm a Christian. I believe that Jesus came to die for my sins because I'm a sinner. That's the only way I get to go to heaven. And because of that, then I believe in his teachings through the Bible. And if that is ultimately why I feel like I've been put on this earth, why wouldn't I devote time every single day to learn more about that? Just this morning, I was reading a devotional, and it's just so applicable to everything that we do. But it talked about how when Jesus was on earth, he was bound by the same 24 hours that we all get, right? We all only get 24 hours, and we got to figure out how to fit everything in life. And he did some pretty incredible things in 33 years on earth with the same 24 hours. Like, he was younger than me when he was done. And I was thinking about it, and I was like, why was he able to be so effective with his 33 years? And it was because he knew what his mission was. he knew why he was here. And so he got to be super intentional with every little detail in his day that made it the most effective use of his 33 years on earth. So for me, prayer, devotionals, like super important. One of the other habits that I have around this that aligns me with my why and my purpose is that every morning before I start my day, I go through my calendar, right? And you guys got your calendars where you're like, here's all the people I'm meeting with today, right? And I actually pray for every single person that I meet. If I know who it is, like I prayed for you guys all this morning that this would be an effective use of your time, that you would learn something from this, that you would be able to move closer to building your best life. Now, I didn't know all your names, but if I know their names, I'm going to pray for them by name. And the power of going into all of my events for the day with this mindset where there's some controversial events I go into and some conflict-riddled events, but I know that I've already prayed for the best for that person for the day. Like that sets off the tone of that meeting in such a powerful, aligning way that it's pretty hard to get stressed out during those, right? Your capacity is really, really high at the end of that. And then finally is intellectual, right? And you see how these weave together, right? Reading, thinking. When it comes to intellectual habits of thinking, right? The thoughts that we put in our mind are going to determine the beginning of our day. How many of you guys have read Miracle Morning? Yeah, a lot of you guys. All right, awesome. How many of you guys are savers like every day? Couple of you? Yeah, a few of you. I mean, what is silence, affirmation, vision, exercise, reading? What's the last S? Scribing, writing your notes. I hate that part. That's why I didn't remember it. And I am not great at this. But I just gave you all like the life hacks or stupid things I do, whatever one you want to call them. How many of you guys ever get on the airplane and you're like, I'm not going to pay for the Wi-Fi, or the Wi-Fi ran out, or it's not working, and you're like on your phone, I'm like, I can't do anything, it's connected, and you're like, oh, let me look at my notes and scroll through my notes and read all. Does anyone else do that? Nobody? I take all of my, okay, one person, great. All right. So I've got all of my notes are on my notes file on my iPhone. And I actually have purposely do this now because I find myself every time I'm on an airplane, like bored. And so I'm like, let me go back and read. So yesterday I was flying over here. It was like a 2.5 hour flight. And I was like, I only want to buy 2 hours of internet. Why am I this cheap? I don't get it. And so like the last 30 minutes we're coming into Boise and I'm like, well, let me look at the notes. And so I'm looking. And I found all my notes for the beginning of this year when I did Miracle Morning for like 40 days straight. And I had all of, what did I read? What were my affirmations? What was my vision for this year? And I was like, yes, I need to go back and start doing that. And starting your day off with that routine, particularly the affirmations and the vision, for me, has been so powerful in, again, jumping into my day and knowing that I'm in the right place, I'm the right person, who I am, the truth about myself, no matter what the world's going to tell me when I enter the day. Because you get a lot of negative thoughts all day long when your clients don't do, your prospects don't do, the other realtor on the other side of the transaction like blows up your deal. Lot of negativity that is overcome. You've got the capacity to handle that stress as it's rising because you know who you are, you're confident who you are, and you know where you're going. All right, those are being habits. Let's talk about relating habits. So 3 relationships that I call out that we need to establish some habits around to grow our capacity. Marital. So anybody married in here? A few of us. All right, half of us. If you're not married, don't tune out right now, because if you can figure some of these things out, it's going to help other relationships that you have, or as maybe you do get married someday. Date night's a big one. In fact, we were talking with Angie about that back there. Tabitha and her were about how important this is. And how many of you guys do date nights? Right? Like, we always wanted to do date nights, and then the babysitter, and we move a lot, so we have to like reestablish our network everywhere we go. And then like my pastor was like, hey, why don't you go on a date every week on the same day and have the same babysitter come at the exact same time? I'm like, oh my gosh, I do that in every other area of my life except date night. Duh. So if you needed to hear that, that's pretty freaking obvious. but it works pretty freaking good. Counseling. How many of you guys go to counseling? Right? I think it's like a HIPAA violation or something. I don't know. But let's talk about this for a minute, right? Guys, for whatever reason, may not love the idea of going to counseling. Women are like, yes, someone's going to listen to me cry for an hour. Guys do it too. All right, here's my sale. Like, I'm not a counselor, but let me sell you on counseling. This is what got me into counseling, which has been amazing, by the way. It's coaching that your insurance plan pays for if you go to the right one. Anyone ever got in an argument with their spouse? Nobody? Never? Okay. Phew. All right. Then this isn't going to apply. But let's just say someday you do get into an argument with your spouse. Who was right in the argument?
Me.
Yeah, me was. Did your spouse think you were right? Hence the definition of an argument. So, what is counseling? Counseling is I'm going to pay some dude or some gal to sit there, and I'm right, so obviously they're going to agree with me and tell my spouse that I'm right, right? Like, that's like, to me, I'm like, well, of course, why wouldn't I go to counseling? I'm like, Tabitha's going to know after he agrees with me, so we're going to get this, right? So that tricked me to get in the door, and that's obviously not what counseling is. What I found out was going to counseling with my wife, whether something was wrong that we were trying to fix or whether something was good and we wanted it to get to great, it was another date night that the insurance company paid for, that we got to sit there and have a refereed connection section where if it wasn't going well, we both felt safe to say the things that we needed to say to grow our connection closer. And if we weren't like engaging or like he was professionally trained to ask the questions to help, and he was horrible. He wasn't even that good at all anyways. But like just the fact that he was there, we had a specific time we had to show up because we were paying money for it. And if the conversation died, he would ask a good question to keep it going. And couple that with a date night, like that marriage is on fire. That's going the right direction right there. Road trips, last thing, we're also talking to Angie about this, right? Road trips are where we do some of our biggest planning and best planning for our future. We dream because we're locked in a car with that person for 5 hours. The kids got the AirPods in and watching their iPad there. And we get to just dream together about where we're headed. And when you dream with someone that you're married to, that builds a ton of capacity. Parental, individual dates with your kiddos. Being in a routine. One of the routines that we did at the beginning of COVID, so we'd kind of just been in Minneapolis. We'd lived there a year. We were renting a house. And our upstairs, so we had 4 bedrooms upstairs that was like the size of this, right? There was my girls' room, my office, Tabitha's office, my girls' bathroom, and then our master bedroom. And it was like all this. Now, we had a main floor and a basement, but like we just like lived there. And so there wasn't much further we could go. And so we're like, all right, if we're going to live in this world together for the next unforeseeable future, what are some extra routines we can have, particularly with our kids? And this one was my favorite. So when we would put our kids to bed at night, because we were around them all day, which how many know that has an opportunity to provide a little bit of stress? Maybe a little bit. It allowed us to sit there, look our kids in the eyes, and think back through the whole day, what is one thing they did that we were proud of? And tell them about it. And so I would take Lily, and I would say, hey Lily, I was so proud of you when your sister was screaming and hollering. You came over to her and you put your arm around her and you gave her a pet. That never happened. But whatever it was, like you put your plate in the sink. Great job, kid. Yeah. Whatever it was, instead of like how we kind of default to yelling and telling, stop doing that, like stop bugging your sister, you go to your room, you're on timeout, right? Is calling out the things that we saw in them that were positive gifts and that they were living out. And we would do that every night where we would tell them one thing that we were proud of them for. And that's before they would go to bed. So that kind of routine. And then the other thing around it is telling your kids you love them, right? Some people like do it way too much. Some people never do it. They're like, I told you when you were born. I'm sure you remember. But the next step with that is to ask them. And if you've got another set of notes here's a good hack. I don't have this in here. Maybe I need to add it to my notes. If you will ask your kids, how do you know that mommy loves you? Or how do you know that daddy loves you? And what they tell you will be the thing that speaks the most to them so that you can replicate that and do that more. And then maybe next time you ask them, it'll be something different. And so you're just building relational capacity with your kid there. Last thing is social. So how many of you guys send calendar invites to your friends? Okay, okay, all right. With your husband, right? So here's how you know you have the right group of friends for you, right? If you're a calendar invite person and you send them calendar invites to hang out, then you got the right people when they either accept it or deny it because they're on the same page as you. As a family who's moved 19 houses since we've been married, 14, I don't know, it's been a lot. 3. Okay. All right. Yeah, so we do that a lot. And so we have to, we get to start over from scratch with this. It's done a few things, right? It teaches us how to intentionally, A, who do we keep from the last town that we're going to have to be intentional to keep that relationship? And B, how do we want to upgrade our relationships in this next town? And so we have a lot of conversations about the intentional choices. We only want to be around transparent people who we're not fake with, because we ain't got time for that. I have a running notes list on my phone of the people we want to hang out with, so that, and I don't say we do this all the time, but like quarterly-ish, we'll be like, all right, who haven't we hung out with? Because, I mean, how many of you guys' social calendar is already like 2 months out, right? So you're already planning for Q1 2022, right? And so you could send them the calendar invites now to get that going. And it sounds weird if I have to be the person to give you permission to that. But again, that's not normal. But how many of you guys want a normal life? No, we want our best life. And best life is accomplished through doing things that aren't normal, like sending our friends calendar invites.
Tracy's gonna do it.
There's a good Twitter quote. All right. Next. Next we have doing habits. All right, so with doing habits, there's our vocation, our avocation, and then I call out financial, right? There's a lot of other doing habits we could do, but financial is a big one. So vocation, you guys are going to talk a little bit about Simon Sinek's why, or your mission in life. For me, this is super important to align around my purpose. And so when I moved to Minneapolis, when I first got there, for our office, I created our mission, vision, values, and belief statement, and really it was just a copy of what I had done in Lubbock, and I brought it, and I'm like, you guys like this, right? And there was no power, there's no buy-in, and so I'm talking to Reed, and I'm like, this isn't going well. He's like, you think? I'm like, yeah. So we went through a 3-month process where we crafted that, and everyone got to put their fingerprints on this, and then at the beginning of every meeting, we put this graphic up there that has our mission, our vision, our values, and beliefs. And sometimes they hate it, and sometimes they love it. Probably, if they were honest, they don't like it as much as I think they like it. But we tell stories. And I asked them, we will not move on to the agenda until we've told 4 stories of seeing our mission, our vision, one of our values, or one of our beliefs lived out in their businesses for the prior week, month, whatever the regularity of our meeting is. And that has firmly rooted our mission into, or our purpose into the vocation of what we do. So much so that on Monday, I have all of my advisors go through and share their business plan with each other for the next 12 weeks, and they have their own mission statement. And I stopped them because I was like, 75% of you have our mission, which is we live to lead others into building their best life, very closely aligned to mine. They had their own adaptation of that, but the fingerprints of that were all over. And it was very affirming to me as the leader to see that it's now permeated its way through the organization. So having a collective purpose and having your own individual purpose, but then reminding yourself of that on a regular basis. Calendar. I love calendars, if you can't tell. Like, and when you read the book, you'll be like, this guy freaking says calendar on like every page. Everything is color coded. Calendar invites are going, like, it's templated. I have a plan for every minute of 80% of the minutes of my day. And so here's the habit that I have around it. All right, Sunday night, Tabitha and I will sit down. Sometimes we're laying down because we're about to fall asleep, but it's what's the calendar for this week. So she gets calendar invites when I'm done working, like what social events do we have at night, what am I doing through the day, and we go day by day through our calendar. Who's dropping the kids off these days, who's picking them up these days, who's staying with us this week, and we do the week as a whole. As I'm doing that, obviously I see the holes in my calendar. Then each morning, as things adjust, right, clients decide they didn't want to look at the house. I mean, your world's so dynamic, right? And it can change during the day, but if at the beginning of the day you don't have every minute planned, every minute that's white in there, how effective do you think you're going to be with that time? You're going to do what you feel like doing, not what you should be doing, right? I know. I'm the same way, right? So at least having a plan for every minute of the day, then you'll operate at 70 or 80% of that, and you'll make adjustments on the fly. But white space is the biggest waster of time. And that's where we get to the idea of doing more doesn't mean more hours. It's because there's a lot of white space in our life that we're not intentional about, that we can scrunch together. And frankly, then we don't have to work as many hours in our vocation, but we can spend it in our avocation on our family. Last thing I'll say on vocation is mastery. So this is a simple story that illustrated to me that I need to do a better job of mastering the basics and helping my team master the basics. I watched a Facebook Live video of a guy, CEO of his company, and he's sitting there, and his receptionist is sitting there. And they were drilling. And she was doing this. Thank you for calling XYZ Corporation. How can I direct your call? He'd be like, no, XYZ Corporation was too quick. Thank you for calling XYZ Corporation. How can I direct your call? Okay, be happier at the beginning. Thank you for calling it. And it was 15 minutes of them drilling, answering the phone. And I'm like, holy cow, that is focused on mastering their business. Now, I'm not saying we all need to get that granular, but can you imagine if you were that granular on the processes in your business and were that focused on mastering what it is that you do? So that was like next level for me. And it's no surprise this guy's doing multiple 7 figures in his business now because he's focused on mastering the basics. Avocation. How many of you guys aren't very good at your avocation? Raise your hand, right? Like we're always on. We're always in our vocation, and it's really hard to get into our avocation. Have any of you guys read the book Living Forward? I've gone through that. So it's about building a life plan, which was a very, very powerful exercise for Tabitha and I. In there, you create these accounts, which are like all the important things in your life, like God, spouse, kids, work, social, hobbies, right? I didn't even get to hobbies. Like hobbies was like number 12, and Reed's like, you shouldn't have more than 4 or 5. You can't be good at like anything past that. Like it was way at the bottom of the list. But now I realize how important it is to have avocations, because I can be that much better in my vocation if I have things that I do for fun, like basketball. Unplugging is what gives us the power to be that much more effective with the time that we have in our vocation. So one of the things that I do, and I honestly, I don't have this figured out for your industry. If I spent a bunch of time in it, I might. I don't know, maybe Brent does. I don't know how you turn your phone off in your business. I know here's what I do know though, is there are high performers in your business who have figured it out. And if I were you, I would like get relation with them and figure out how they do it. Because this right here, which Tabitha will tell you, right? And I bring her with me, so she keeps me honest. I don't say anything that I don't actually do. I'm 40, 50% on this. But when I get home, which sometimes means just walking upstairs from the basement, I take my phone, and if I had a crappy day, I just throw it on my bed. If I had a good day, I neatly set it on my charger, but it's there and it's away for the rest of the night, and then I get to go be present with my family. I'm unplugged from my phone, and I'm plugged in to my avocation, my family, resting, relaxing, having fun, doing whatever it is. Other piece is serving. And I imagine you guys, without even having to be around you, have a pretty strong culture of serving and giving back to the community here. That right there is one of the biggest capacity builders in the mental game, because like when you get that nice big commission check, or you have a really good month or a really good year, it's tempting to start thinking that it's all about you. And like, I'm doing really good, and like, I'm going to take over the world. And regularly serving, subordinating yourself to a cause that's greater, and putting your time, which is all of your guys' most precious resource, into someone else, again, reminds you of the purpose, your why in your vocation, to help you to continue to kill it like you are. So serving is a huge capacity building component of your habits. And then finally, financial. And I call this out specifically in the book because everyone has to deal with money. Money is the number one reason for divorce. It's the number one reason that people don't do a lot of the things that they should be doing, because their money isn't where it needs to be. And so having a habit around talking with your spouse or yourself, what is our vision for our money? Like, what's the purpose of us having money and financial resources? Where are we headed with that? What's our budget? How many of us operate off of a budget, right? And there's different seasons for this, right? There was a season in Tabitha in my life where she is like, I'm the spender, she's the saver. And when we got married, right, I had like $30,000 in credit card debt, and she had $30,000 in the bank. And so we went through a season where we got very, very granular on our budget. And you guys, do we like Dave Ramsey? Not like Dave Ramsey here. Some of us like Dave Ramsey. I hate Dave Ramsey. That guy cost me tens of thousands of dollars of commissions being in the life insurance business. You can imagine. I hate him. But
Spenders hate Dave Ramsey. Because we're doing it now, and I don't like it either.
I mean, even the things he says about your business, right? Like, it probably cost you some commissions. You're like just about to close, and your clients come to you and they're like, "Oh, Dave said I need to put 20% down, so in 4 years I'll call you back." Right? Or you're going to continue renting that house. Okay, right, whatever. But I love Dave Ramsey, because Dave Ramsey his program set the Perry family trajectory to a whole new level for a season. So we did the cash thing. We had the envelopes. We're walking around with envelopes with cash falling around. Like the beginning of the month, we pulled all the money out. This is how much we got Dave Ramseyized. I remember it was like the 30th of the month, and I love nothing more than eating out. Like, this town is amazing. We did a progressive lunch-ish, dinner-ish thing yesterday downtown. And so we're at the end of the month. We got no money left in our eating out budget. And I think I was a partner at this point. I mean, guys, I was making $250,000 a year. Like, we weren't poor. Like, we had plenty of money, but the budget said we were poor, which is the point, right? And I wanted sushi so bad. So Tabitha and I, we walked around our house and like picked up all of the change everywhere. And we got all of the dimes and nickels and quarters and stray dollar bills that were in like that jar that was there for like 7 years, right?
Your junk drawer.
The junk drawer. Like, we're looking everywhere. We went to Walmart and we went to Coinstar. We dumped them all in there and got like $47 and then went and had our sushi dinner. Like, that's how militant we were on this cash budget. And so we got everything paid off. which set us free to do some pretty incredible things in our life going forward. So now, do we have a budget? Not really. Every Saturday, well, not every Saturday, once a month, twice a month, I go through and I categorize everything we've spent money on, right? And I got our Quicken account, and so I know right now it's a history lesson. It's not a proactive lesson, but we keep an eye on it so that we know, all right, we need to adjust this, we need to change that. There's times where we're like, man, we're spending so much in this, and so I'd go to someone else and say, how do you guys do it for less than that? And learn things. And I'll tell you, so there are seasons, bottom line on that, there are seasons for different types of financial habits around budget, around your vision, and ultimately it comes to having that habit of an open dialogue with your spouse. What are we after? What are we doing? Where are we at? How can we get better? And next. Or with yourself, right? Yeah. Don't talk out loud to yourself. All right, you guys with me? Do we need to, hold on, everyone stand up for a second here. Everyone stand up. All right, how many of you guys ever watch ice skating in the Olympics? Anybody? Right? All right, so everyone do their best triple axel right now. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Pull, no muscle pulling, triple axels. Triple axels. All right, now sit down. Okay, now we're good. We got the blood flowing. Did we lose anybody? Did anyone die? Nobody. All right.
I don't spend well.
We're in the home stretch here. Coffee refills. So, last thing is relationships. 2 types of relationships. And again, you guys see how these are intertwined. Professional relationships, personal relationships. And the way I like to think about relationships when it comes to building our capacity is that whatever stress I'm experiencing right now, someone else has gone through that and conquered it. Someone else has experienced this and had breakthrough. And I'm going to tell you a very, very recent story where I had someone close to me, 2 people close to me, who were about to enter the ultimate breakdown cycle. This was 3 Mondays ago. I had back-to-back phone calls from agents in my office who said, one of them, the first one opens up with, hey, Steve. I'm like, hey, man, I haven't talked to you in like a week. I've called you. Like, where you been? How's everything going? He's like, it's honestly not going very good. I've been talking to my counselor. And actually, I was just on the phone with the hotline. I'm like, the hotline? Oh. He's like, yeah, that hotline. Suicide hotline. I'm like, okay. I'm like, what's going on? Like, what'd they say? He goes, well, I was talking to them, and they said I should call you. I'm like, I don't think I'm trained for this. Okay, well, let's talk about it. And he talked through a lot of the negative things that he was telling himself. He had his mental work, his mental habits were not strong. And at this point in time, he needed a relationship. And in this case, happened to be his manager, but I got to be a coach and I got to be a mentor. And I got to speak into him life. I got to help him deny the lies that he was hearing, right? The disappointment and the disillusionment that he thought his greener pasture was no pasture at all at this point in time. And he's doing better. He's made some changes. He's moving. But that was a relationship that he built the ultimate capacity in. I'm telling my wife about this in the car as we're driving to Bible study, and my phone rings again. Another one of my agents calls me. And he said, Steve, I just got back from ICU. I've been in the ICU for 3 days. My liver's failing. They diagnosed me with Crohn's disease, and this kid's 20 years old. And he's like, I don't know why I want to live anymore. Like, I'm tired of fighting this. Like, this kid grew up, his parents were both meth cooks. Like, they're in jail. They used him as a drug mule. They tried to put him in jail for running drugs, and he was like 12 years old. The attorney's like, are you kidding me? Grew up to be an Eagle Scout. Kid's brilliant, just got married, has a young kid, and he wants to be done. He's like, I'm so tired of fighting. My life has been so difficult over and over and over and over again. He's like, and quite frankly, Steve, since I've been here just the last few months and you taught me the capacity model and I read it, like I go through that daily and I'm trying to figure out like my education and my habits, like how do I increase my capacity to handle these things? And I feel like I just keep getting knocked down over and over and over again. And so I thought I'd call you. And fortunately, I had been trained 30 minutes earlier on how to have this conversation. And we went through the same thing again. And we talked about all the lies that he was telling himself and the truth. And it gave him an exercise on write down 3 things that you're thankful for. Write down 3 gifts that you have in your life. And ultimately for him, he didn't know what his vision or purpose was. He thought that he only hurt and harmed people. And so I said, what are 3 reasons that you think God put you on this earth, that you could make an impact? Because quite frankly, he may die. He may not get the liver transplant. Like he is in the ICU right now still 3 weeks later, or again. But in that short period of time. And we talked about, his kid, right? Obviously, he didn't have great parents. But he can be there to be a good father for his kid, to help his legacy and his kid build that. Same thing with his spouse. But in that time where education wasn't helping him, he knew all the right things. Education wasn't helping him build his capacity. In that time where the habits that he had in place, he was still maxing out his stress. There's just times in life where we need to have a relationship that will ultimately help us break through the capacity ceiling and the stress that we're feeling and hitting our head on it. And so with that, it's important that you have those in advance. Like today is the time that you need to go seek out those relationships. So whether it's a coach, a manager, a mentor, I want to say coach, manager, and mentor, those are 3 different people. 3 different people. You should have a coach, you should have a manager, and you should have a mentor. And the coach is a pure relationship where there is no like, I need you to hit these numbers because you're a part of our company. Like you need to hit these numbers. The coach is all about your goals. The manager is going to be the accountability where you get to keep doing the things you're doing because they're helping manage you. And then a mentor is the person who's been there and done that. Accountability partners. One thing I believe about accountability is that no one can hold you accountable. You have to choose to be accountable to someone. So you have to choose this person. This person doesn't choose to be your accountability person. So you have to seek out that relationship. Peers. I mean, you guys have awesome peers. So like, which are the ones that you rely on? One of the things that we're seeing in our organization is how this is super important in this virtual world that we've kind of morphed into, where it's allowed us to hire people geographically who are hours apart, which has been good for our business, but it's not so good for being able to do this on a regular basis. And so seeking out relationships with peers where you're able to connect when you can't necessarily walk across the hall and ask them something. So you guys have that. Like that's a blessing. Like utilize that to the max. Advocates, business industry leaders. Personal relationships, we talked about spouse, kids, extended family. Here's where I'm going to tell you that just because someone had the same last name as you a few generations ago does not mean you owe them any of your most precious resource, your time. Because when you say yes to something that's not a high value priority, you're saying no to something that is a high value priority. And if they haven't earned that right, when it comes to people earning their time, they have to steward the responsibility of earning your time. If you're not getting a return on it and they're not getting a return on it, then like they don't get time in your calendar anymore. So if I have to give you permission for that, like stop giving time to people just because they're family that don't deserve it. Social, mentee. Right? This kind of ties into serving, but if someone's mentoring you, you should be mentoring someone else. I don't care where you're at in life. You just started in this business and you haven't even closed your first transaction. You're further along than someone else who wants to go on a journey that looks like this. You have giftings and experience in your life that someone hasn't gotten to yet, and you can help them get there quicker. And then the last thing I'll share is take your shot. I'll tell you a quick story. So, when I was in Lubbock, I'll tell you the humbling part of this. You get the backstory of this one. So, do you guys, is there like a leadership Boise through the Chamber of Commerce? Is there anything like that? Heard of that? Anyone do anything with Chamber of Commerce? Yeah, perfect. Good. Me neither. But I had moved to this new town, and I didn't know anyone. I didn't know who the movers and shakers were. I didn't know. I thought that was important. It's not really that important, but I thought it was. And so there was this group called Leadership Lubbock, which was super cool. 40 people. That's 4. 40 is 10 times that. 40 people. You have to apply. It's like getting into college. You apply, you tell them all the good things about yourself, and then they accept 40 people into this program where once a month you take an entire day and you learn about either the government or the sports or business or finance or like a different sector of the town that you live in. And you drive around and meet the presidents of the companies or the athletic director of the college, different things like that. Well, so one day, so the humbling part, right? I applied for this, and I think I'm hot crap, right? I'm the youngest managing partner in a Fortune 100 company. Like, we're crushing it. Like, I'm the man. I got rejected. They're like, nope, you didn't qualify. I'm like, what? You want me? I'm pretty cool. And so then I was like, it's West Texas, the good old boys club. Like, of course they did. So then even worse, like on January 3rd, they called me. They're like, well, so we had someone back out, and you were an alternate. Do you want to join? I'm like, oh, great, I'm the alternate. Like, I'm like the last kid who wasn't picked, and then like one guy got hurt, and they brought, okay, I'll do it. Like, but Tabitha remembers, like, I was struggling with, like, be humble, Steve. Lay down your pride. Go in and serve. Go and learn. Like, you wanted this because you wanted to learn. Go do it. So I did it. So that was my entree into this group. Anyhow, we're about 4th month, and we're sitting in a room like this, and there's this, they bring this gal in to speak, and I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, I grew up watching her. She was like a 4-time WNBA MVP, and apparently she's from Lubbock. I didn't know this. And so she's talking to us and just sharing stories. I'm like, this is super, super cool. And so it's all done, and I'm like, this is someone I need to take a shot at. Like, I want to connect with this person. And so as she's talking, I'm like, all right, what am I going to say? What am I going to ask? How am I going to make a connection with the 40 people in here that I can come back and, like, connect with her later? And so she's like, anyone got any questions? I'm like, yep, I do. And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, hey, so when I was growing up, I loved basketball shoes. And your basketball shoes were awesome. I loved them. They were super cool. But they always made them in women's sizes, and I could never, like, get them. I'm like, any chance they're ever going to release them in men's size? Stupid question. Like, these are 20 years ago, but that's the best I could come up with. And she's like, funny you should ask. I'm actually working with Nike right now, and we're going to re-release them this summer, and we'll have them in men's sizes. I'm like, thanks, God. That was a great question to ask. She's like, I'll give you a pair. What size do you wear? I'm like, 9.5. She's like, you got small feet. I'm like, no, she didn't say that. And so she's like, I'll give you a pair when we release. I'm like, that's awesome. She's like, all right, any other questions? So then she gets ushered off with her private security or whatever. And I'm like, okay, well, like, how is she going to know how to give me these shoes? Like, that was whatever. I'm like, I gotta reconnect. I've established the first. I took my shot, right? It's headed towards the hoop. It's in the right direction. How do I direct it to go in? So then I looked her up, and I found her on social media. I watched a couple videos and documentaries about her, learned more, Googled, like, oh, well, she's coaching for Texas Tech right now. And then I went to the head of our program. I'm like, how did you get the connection? She's like, well, and I told her, I'm like, here's what I want to do. I'm like, she's coaching for the women's basketball program. So I asked this question. So she said she was going to give me these shoes. And at first I was going to be like, can you just connect me so she knows how to give them to me? And then I'm like, no, I want to actually have a meaningful connection with this person. She's coaching for the school. They suck. So all the coaches just got fired. So she actually doesn't have a job right now. I'm like, I want to visit with her about her working in my firm. Because think about it, right? Like, she has all of these professional athlete connections. She could absolutely crush it in this business. And the gal's like, yeah, I like it. That's pretty ballsy of you, but like, you should do it. Can we say ballsy? We probably say ballsy.
In this group,
I'm
yes.
pretty sure we can say ballsy. So.
That was very PG of you.
That's a
We didn't
pronoun.
tell you about
I didn't want to assume. So she connects me with the gal. I send her an email. I'm like, hey, this, and this. I want to visit with you about you coming to work at my firm. She's like, yeah, you hit it right on, because I'd done my research. I had learned about what was important to her, and I named off some of those things. So then go back to mastering your vocation. I spent a whole day preparing for this interview, which I do hundreds of these a year. But like, I wanted to make sure it was good. And so she came in, we sat, and an hour turned into 2 hours. She cried, I cried. She was like, this is amazing. I want to do this. And we just had an amazing connection. I'll fast forward to where it ended up not working out for certain reasons, that she didn't end up becoming a part of our firm. But now we could text her right now. I could tell her I'm telling this story. And so when I say take a shot, that's what I mean. Come up with somebody that would be a super high value. Because by the way, if she had joined our firm, we wouldn't have been up 100%. We'd have been up like 300%. Like, there was a lot of opportunity. And find someone that has a super high value if you're able to connect with them. It's going to absolutely catapult your life forward for one reason or another. And then think through a strategy. How can I connect with this person? Who should I connect with? Who can connect me to them? What's my value proposition for them? Build out that strategy, and then just take it. Go for it, because you're not going to land all of them, but you're going to land a lot more than you think. There are so many ways to get a hold of people that we never had just 10 years ago. One of the best people I know at doing this, who in and of himself is extremely successful in business, but he just randomly DMs people on Instagram and has gotten some of the most amazing podcast interviews and is now business partners with some of them. So you never ever know what sliding into a DM can do for your business. I barely know what that means. I have like 4 Instagram followers. All right. So what is your envisioned future? Where do you see your capacity? Where is your best life? How do you define it? Which is what I know Brent's going to talk about today. You guys are going to do your 135, your 411. I do 135 every quarter. Reed maybe add another one to it, so it's like 1135. My daughters try to add up what those numbers are. But whatever your envisioned future is what's going to propel your capacity to grow. So with that, hopefully you guys got some good notes. I'm going to send you a copy of all of those notes. I'm going to follow up on all of the different subtopics I talked about, and I wrote some fun little stories and some little jokes and things in there to help you remember what we talked about today. The only other thing I'll say, if you want, I actually have an infographic book summary that I had created. So if you go to bestlife.builders, it will give you a chance to sign up for that, and it'll email it to you so you can get a copy of that. And you can kind of see the story throughout there to help you with your notes as well. So with that, I took up 86 of the 90 minutes. What questions do you guys have?